We all know Morocco for its bustling souks and sunlit deserts. But beyond the postcards, this land hides pigeon-powered leather tanneries in Fes and a road sign in Zagora that still insists Timbuktu is 52 days away. In Marrakech, a single square can overwhelm your senses with snake charmers and storytellers, and high in the Atlas Mountains, cedar forests shelter wild Barbary macaques, while snow falls above a simmering desert below. Chebi's towering dunes shift miles each year, creating an inland sea of sand found in only a handful of places worldwide. Do you know that Fes sits within an ancient web of rivers and springs that once fed the city's leather vats and power mills, linking urban craft to the surrounding natural landscape? Enter Fes, and the city unfolds like a living manuscript. Its Medina a labyrinth, where centuries of artisans have honed techniques passed down through families. Every narrow alley leads to a microcosm of craft, from the delicate wood carving of the Negerine souk to the bustling dye pits of the Chouara tanneries. The air near the tanneries carries an unmistakable tang, but step onto a nearby rooftop, and the colors below resolve into rugs of indigo, crimson, and saffron that mirror the region's natural dyes. From there, one can follow the course of the Oued Face to ancient water wheels that once powered fulling mills, a network that made the city an industrial hub long before modern factories. At the heart of the Medina sits the University of Al-Qarawiyyin, considered by many historians as the world's oldest continuously operating degree-granting university. Its library and courtyards have been a crucible for knowledge, attracting scholars whose ideas flowed outward to shape North African and European thought. Walk a few steps and the intricacy of Bau Inania and Al-Atharini madrasas reveals plasterwork and Zeli tile mosaics so precise they seem mathematical in their beauty. These decorative forms linked to geometry were both spiritual language and social currency, communicating status and devotion across the Medina's stone corridors. Beyond the Medina, the royal palace gates hint at the city's layered power, while nearby tanner families still mix traditional mordants drawn from plant and mineral sources and keep ancestral recipes alive. On the Sahara's fringe, Zagora shelters one of Morocco's most unusual landscapes, a palm-lined desert corridor fed by hidden water. Do you know the Trickles Valley around Zagora channels an underground aquifer that has sustained oases and villages for millennia? Date palms there grow from ancient Qattara canals, their irrigation tunnels carrying water beneath baking sands. Those canals trace routes once traveled by salt caravans bound for Timbuktu, a commerce that shaped cultures here. In town, a weathered sign still points Timbuktu 52 days, a reminder of Zagora's role as a desert crossroads. From Zagora, the road leads to Timbuktu, a clay village famed for its Quranic libraries and vivid green pottery. Zagora's markets today blend old and new, dates and carpets sold beside satellite dishes and motorcycles. Families harvest dates, sing traditional songs, and maintain weather lore that still guides planting and travel. Following the Draa upstream, you'll encounter successive kasbahs and fortresses that map trade, defense, and cultural exchange. Each kasbah links to the next, the landscape a stitched network of survival strategies spanning centuries of change. Zagora is thus both gateway and memory, a living corridor where water, trade, and story continue to shape human life, and the desert keeps revealing new secrets to those who listen closely. On the northern shore, Martil Beach reveals a rare coastal meeting where Morocco's Rif Mountains tumble directly into a Mediterranean crescent of golden sand, creating one of the few mountain-to-sea beaches on this sea that feels like two worlds stitched together. Do you know that Morocco's Rif Range traps moist Mediterranean air and feeds hidden freshwater springs and estuaries that quietly renew the coastline around Martil, shaping dunes and reed beds few visitors ever notice? Strolling Martil's long promenade, you sense a layered seaside culture where North African rhythms meet Andalusian echoes, families sharing picnics under umbrellas, while fishermen patch nets on the shore. The beach's broad arc of soft sand slopes into sheltered coves where children hunt for shell fragments and windsurfers catch steady morning gusts that roll down from the mountain passes. At dusk, the Rif's silhouette is punctured by pine crowns and mosque spires, an immediate reminder that urban life and wild mountain ecosystems are braided tightly along this coast. From Martil, the coastline leads west to Taliouine, whose whitewashed Medina preserves handcrafted traditions and crafts that were shaped by maritime trade and mountain routes. Turn east and the shoreline curves toward Ceuta and the busy strait, where currents, borders, and cultures have mixed for centuries. Yet it is Martil's quieter estuaries that shelter migratory birds and small fishing communities. In winter, rare northern storms resculpt the shore, uncovering fossilized shells and ancient pebbles that tell a quieter geological story of rising and falling seas. Local elders point to rocky pools and recall shifting tides and changing river mouths, a living oral map of environmental change held in memory across generations. Here you can taste northern Morocco in every bite: grilled sardines, citrus and olive oil beside the surf, flavors that trace trade routes from mountain groves to coastal nets. Follow the narrow river paths inland from Martil, and you climb through cork and cedar groves toward mountain villages that seem to perch on the rift's skin, each hamlet a living link between sea and highland. Martil Beach is more than sand and surf. It is a hinge connecting currents, springs, human stories, and centuries of movement along northern Morocco, a modest coast that quietly holds a much larger geography. Casablanca's shoreline is dominated by the Hassan Soun Mosque, whose minaret rises 210 meters above the Atlantic and is the tallest in North Africa. Built partly over the sea with a laser beam aimed toward Mecca and a marble floor that opens to the ocean below, it is both a spiritual and engineering marvel. Walking from the mosque along the Corniche, you feel the city's maritime pulse in the fishermen's nets and the glint of modern glass towers. Here, surfside cafes sit alongside luxury hotels, while locals play backgammon beneath palm trees that lean toward the horizon. Casablanca's urban fabric fuses French Art Deco boulevards with traditional Moroccan riads, a contrast visible in the downtown facades and the Habous district markets. In the Habous, narrow alleys lead to artisan workshops where leather, brass, and intricate zelly tiles are still shaped by hand. The Old Medina offers fragrant spice stalls and the Mahkama du Pacha, a judicial palace whose carved cedar ceilings and zellage tile work feel like stepping into a hidden sultan's chamber. Just beyond the Medina, modern avenues carry the city's economic life, from banks to innovative startups that signal Morocco's 21st century ambitions. Casablanca may surprise you with its scale and contradictions. Monumental religious architecture beside glass-faced commerce, intimate souks beside expansive boulevards. And as you leave the city toward inland kasbahs or Atlantic beaches, the marks of Casablanca's blend of saffron, faith, and modernity stay with you. This coastal giant acts as Morocco's gateway, but its stories are personal, found in a bowl of harira, a tile artisan's patina, or a child's game beneath the mosque's shadow. Next, we'll follow the rail south to Marrakech, where red stone ramparts and the chaos of Jemaa el-Fnaa reveal a different kind of Moroccan heartbeat. Guelmim sits where the desert first breathes over the Atlantic plains, a threshold where shifting dunes meet scrub and sea-scented wind. Known locally as Casbahs, the gateway to the desert, its name evokes the caravans and camel bells that have threaded this land for centuries. Every week, the town's camel market erupts in a spectacle of dust, bargaining, and tribal greetings that feel unchanged by time. Herders from inland bring sturdy camels alongside goats, woven blankets, and stories, trading not just animals, but the rhythms of nomadic life. Along the Noun River, the market spills into alleys scented with sesi and grilled fish, connecting desert traders to coastal fishermen in unexpected commerce. Old caravan paths meet paved roads here, and travelers sense how Guelmim stitches remote oases to the bustling ports farther west. In the heat of midday, the town's whitewashed houses shimmer, while elders recall roots to Jegaa and the soft, sea-polished cliffs beyond. At dusk, the horizon opens, and you can imagine dunes rolling like ocean swells toward horizons, where nomads still navigate by stars. Local storytellers weave legends of desert kings and smuggling routes, hinting at a past more dangerous and more romantic than maps allow. Those same tales guide modern guides who lead small caravans toward remote camps where nights bloom with constellations. Guelmim's bazaars sell more than goods. They sell patience, negotiation, and a cultural handshake between settled life and permanent motion. As the town hums, the road southward narrows and the landscape strips away distractions until only sand, wind, and ski remain. Travelers leaving Guelmim carry new maps, not of highways, but of wind-sculpted ridges and shaded wells known only to families of nomads. In that transition, the city becomes less a destination and more a compass, pointing toward the deep silence of the Sahara. In every exchange, Guelmim teaches a lesson about borders, not lines on paper, but the meeting zones of climates, peoples, and histories. This is why, for many, the town is less a stop and more the point where Morocco's dual faces, salt and sand, first reconcile. Years spent at crossroads have taught its people to read weather, markets, and travelers with equal precision. Step off the highway here, and you step into a living borderland where each footprint is a question and each horizon an answer. The High Atlas harbors isolated cedar forests that shelter the endangered Barbary macaque, a relic species surviving since the Ice Age. Do you know the Atlas Mountains cradle Jebel Toubkal, North Africa's highest peak, standing at 4,167 meters and drawing climbers from around the world? From Marrakech's red walls, the mountain range rises in tiers of ochre, pine, and snow, folding natural theaters into dramatic valleys. The winding route from Marrakech to Imlo serves as the doorway where mule paths become stairways into remote Berber settlements. In Imlil, families have been guiding ascents to Toubkal for generations while maintaining terraced fields that look like stone tapestries. Follow those same trails deeper and you'll enter Ait Ben Haddou, the Happy Valley, where orchards, ancient kasbahs, and communal life persist in striking harmony. Bridges of rope and cedar link hamlets, and on clear mornings the call to prayer floats down limestone chasms into sunlit meadows. That calm light leads onward to the Dades and Tadra gorges, where the Atlas gives way to vertical cliffs that filmmakers once mistook for moonscapes. Carved by rivers over millennia, these gorges shelter hidden gardens and kasbahs, whose clay walls shift color with the sun. From the Dades, the road descends toward the pre-Saharan plains and Ait Ben Haddou, a UNESCO Kesar that stitches the highlands to the desert. Ait Ben Haddou's labyrinth of earthen houses was built by traders who transported salt, gold, and stories across the Atlas passes. Those same passes funnel meltwater into the Draa and Dades valleys, feeding oases that once sustained entire caravan cultures. Walking the mountain tracks, you meet women weaving in bright wool, elders reciting oral histories, and children racing goats down switchbacks. Their lives map the seasons of the range: spring snowmelt, summer harvests, and autumn migrations to lower pastures. Scientists are now racing to document the Atlas's microclimates, where rare alpine plants cling to isolated ridges like botanical time capsules. Understanding these fragile systems matters because the highlands are a water tower for millions below, and their fate shapes Morocco's future. Only a handful of places on Earth hold sand seas that sing. Morocco's Sahara dunes emit haunting harmonic tones when the wind shifts. Do you know the Sahara Desert in Morocco hosts singing dunes in Erg Chebi near Merzouga that can boom like a giant drum? Stretching beyond the horizon, the dunes of Erg Chebi rise in waves as high as 150 meters and reshape themselves with every storm. Nomad caravans still cross these rippled seas, guiding camels along ancient routes that once linked sub-Saharan kingdoms to Atlantic ports. At Merzouga, visitors trade the city noise for a silence so vast it sharpens the stars above into learning maps. Night brings a galaxy spilled low across the Skife, and Bedouin storytellers trace constellations by memory, while tea steam curls in the dark. Beyond Erik Chebi, the quieter Erik Chagaga offers wilder solitude where sand meets hidden salt plains and fossilized riverbeds. Both ergs were shaped by the Atlas Mountains, whose rain shadow carved the Sahara and channeled life into linear oases. The Draya Valley, a green ribbon of date palms and kasbahs, springs from that narrow mercy of water and links the desert to the high Atlas. Travelers once moved along this corridor to trade silver, salt, and stories, leaving fortified villages like Ait Ben Haddou as stone echoes of those crossings. In the Sahara, you feel time folding, days marked by sun, nights by stars, and human rhythms tuned to water and wind. To cross it is to understand why Morocco's cultural map is stitched from Berber, Arab, and Saharan threads, braided over millennia. Listen closely, and the dunes will still speak. A reminder that the desert is not empty, but full of stories waiting to be followed. Follow those stories, and they will lead you onward, from the last dune to the high peaks where Morocco's lifelines are born. Ras El Ma, the crystalline spring that feeds Chefchaouen's blue alleys, is one of Morocco's rare year-round mountain springs that gush through karst limestone. Do you know Ras El Ma's waters were believed by locals to influence the town's famous indigo pigments and even sustain an endemic trout found only in this stretch of the Rif? The spring emerges in terraces of ferns and moss, spilling into shallow pools where villagers wash wool and children paddle with bare feet. From these pools, clear channels cut through cobbles and wooden sluices, carrying water down into the heart of the Medina and beyond into terraced fields. At dawn, you can hear the water's steady voice threading the alleys, a constant that once guided mule caravans and now draws painters and photographers. Stone mills and old water wheels, some still turning, nod to centuries when Ras El Ma powered local industries and kept dye vats luminous. Walk a little uphill, and the stream widens into a ribbon of emerald, where aromatic herbs and wildflowers cluster in the cool microclimate. Small waterfalls here form fragile pools that host insects and amphibians, rare in the surrounding dry hills, creating an unexpected biodiversity pocket. Stories say the spring marks a boundary between the cultivated town and the wilder Rif, a place where shepherd paths meet tourist routes. Hikers follow the water's sound to reach panoramic ridges, making Ras El Ma the quiet threshold from Chefchaouen's blues to the mountain's raw greens. Local women still carry jugs from the spring, and their daily rhythms keep techniques of indigo dyeing and wool washing alive in plain sight. Those domestic rituals turn the water into a cultural thread, connecting family life to the geology and climate that created Ras El Ma. In rainy seasons, the spring swells and redraws the landscape, carving new rivulets and revealing rock faces smoothed over millennia. In dry summers, it contracts, but never vanishes, a stubborn source that defines why Chefchaouen remained habitable where other villages withered. Photographers trek from the Medina at dawn to capture reflections and the small human dramas by the water's edge, preserving ephemeral moments. And when you trace the stream downstream, you realize the same water that colors the walls also irrigates orchards and sustains forgotten stone terraces. That continuity makes Ras El Ma a quiet teacher. If you learn to read its channels, you can read the town's past and foresee its future. Stay with the spring for an hour, and you'll leave with a different map of Chefchaouen, one drawn in water, craft, and the patient labor of generations. High above the Atlas, Morocco's rare spectacle of Saharan dunes spilling into alpine valleys creates a landscape almost nowhere else on Earth. Do you know that Marrakech sits at the crossroads of that meeting? A city whose ochre ramparts capture desert light and riverine green alike. Step into Jemaa el-Fnaa, and you enter a living theater where storytellers, spice sellers, and snake charmers rewrite the day with every shout. The labyrinthine souks that fan out from the square trade not just goods, but centuries of craft, from brass lanterns to indigo-dyed wool. Turn a corner, and the Koutubia's minaret rises like an old compass, its shadow measuring the city's pulse through prayer and time. Nearby, the intricate tiles and silent courtyards of Bahia Palace remind you that Marrakech is as much about intimate beauty as loud spectacle. A few tram stops away, Majorelle Garden cools the senses with cobalt echoes, a botanist's surprise amid the ochre city. Yves Saint Laurent's imprint links art and preservation here, And from those shaded paths, you can imagine caravans of saffron and amber passing by. The Sadian tombs hide mosaic secrets, while the Menara Basin mirrors the Atlas, a simple pool that opens into mountain myths. Day trips toward the Ourika Valley or Imlil fold the city into rivers and terraces, connecting Marrakech to Berber villages and snow-fed trails. Follow the road southwest, and the Atlantic breeze of Essaouira proves the city's ties to sea trade and salt-scented music. Head east and you lose pavement to sand, where Erg Chebi's waves of dunes remind you how Marrakech mediates between ocean, mountain, and desert. Here, every alley leads to another story, and every courtyard holds a secret that only slow footsteps reveal. Stay with us to uncover the hidden markets, ancient recipes, and the single dish that travelers swear you must taste to understand the city. And you will understand why so many travelers find themselves setting out from this city, compelled to follow its roads into the wilds beyond. In the coming chapters, we will cross tiled thresholds, sample mint tea in hidden riads, and meet artisans whose hands have mapped time. Prepare to be surprised by the tiny things that define Marrakech: a whispered recipe, a repaired loom, a doorway painted for luck. The high Atlas foothills around Taliouine host Morocco's single most extensive saffron crocus terraces, a rarity that yields crimson threads worth their weight in gold. Do you know Taliouine's saffron is one of the few spices harvested by hand at dawn, and its stigmas color whole villages during harvest? From the ochre kasbahs and winding mule tracks of the anti-Atlas, the road narrows into valleys where purple fields appear at sunrise. Farmers in mud-brick villages still teach generations to pluck crocus flowers 2 hours before sunrise to preserve fragrance and potency. The scent is subtle but persistent, a floral almond honey whisper that lingers in market stalls and tagines alike. Saffron from Taliouine colors not only food but festivals and dowries, stitched into cloth and sachets passed between families. You will meet women who guard harvest secrets, which days to pick, which buds to leave, passed down in song and patient hands. Those same hands sort tiny red threads under kerosene lamps because the difference between priced strands and ordinary is microscopic. Economically, Taliouine's saffron stitches remote valleys into global trade, reaching chefs in Paris and perfumers in Tehran. Yet the crop's yield is fragile. A hectare can require hundreds of thousands of flowers and only produce a handful of grams. Understanding that climate explains why saffron here tastes distinctly floral, with green, honeyed notes that connoisseurs prize. By the end of a harvest day, you'll see why villagers call saffron red gold. It has forged identity, sustenance, and stories. And when you follow a single thread from field to jar, you trace centuries of craft that connect mountain homesteads to kitchens around the world. Snowmelt from the high Atlas percolates through ancient channels and keeps the palm groves surrounding Ait Ben Haddou surprisingly green even in the driest years. Do you know the high Atlas's rare fog drip and subterranean kataras are partly why this Kesar survived when many others vanished? Ait Ben Haddou's ochre walls rise like a mirage on the edge of the Sahara. But the story beneath the clay is older and stranger than the films that made it famous. Its compact streets, stacked houses, and towering granaries were built to store water, grain, and stories for caravans crossing between the desert and the mountains. Many visitors come for the cinematic backdrops, yet the real spectacle is the living technique of rammed earth and sun-baked mud that has endured centuries of heat and rare floods. Generations of masons repaired, replastered, and layered the walls with the same simple materials, preserving a palette that shifts with the light. The Kesar's ramparts are punctuated by watchtowers whose silhouettes echo the fortified villages scattered along the Drau Valley, linking Ait Ben Haddou to a network of trade and survival. Families here still maintain ancestral cisterns and terraces that collect every rare drop, connecting human ingenuity to the landscape. Walk its narrow alleys, and you'll find doorways carved with symbols once used by caravans to mark safe houses and shared water sources, small signs of a vast trans-Saharan memory. The kasbahs that flank the approach hint at Ouarzazate and the modern crossroads beyond, where filmmakers arrive to frame an imagined past against an authentic one. Despite its fame, Ait Ben Haddou remains a community threaded with practical rituals, repair festivals, seasonal migrations, and communal plastering that keep the earthen architecture alive. To understand the Kesar is to read how people, stone, and scarce water negotiated survival here for centuries, and why this fragile masterpiece still commands attention today. High in the Atlas Mountains, Okaimedan hosts one of Africa's rare alpine ski slopes and snowfields above 2,600 meters. Do you know that those tawny Atlas peaks feed rivers that carve cedar forests where Barbary macaques and cedars older than Rome still survive? From those cedars, the valleys tumble eastward into Ephraim's surprising alpine meadows, a town nicknamed Morocco's Little Switzerland. Do you know that the meltwaters then thread through gorges like Todra and Dades, sculpting vertical canyons that feel impossibly ancient? Follow the riverbeds and the landscape shifts again into the desert's warm palms and ochre kasbahs around Tinghir. Do you know that these same routes were once caravan highways, where salt, gold, and stories moved between sub-Saharan Africa and the Mediterranean? Keep walking, and the sand rises into the monumental Erkchebi dunes at Merzouga, dunes that glow like molten copper at sunrise. Do you know that hidden beneath some dunes lie fossilized river channels and ancient lakes that reveal a very different Sahara from thousands of years ago? At night, the desert unfurls one of the planet's clearest skies, a dome brilliant with Milky Way detail that guided Berber navigators for centuries. Do you know that nearby oases support palm groves and small communities who still harvest dates using techniques unchanged for generations? From the desert's edge, the Rif and Anti-Atlas slopes lean toward the Atlantic, where Essaouira's windswept harbor speaks of sailors and spice routes. Do you know the same breezes carried cedar planks and argan oil to ports that linked Morocco to Europe and the wider world? Finally, the river of landscapes pours into Marrakech, where red walls frame gardens, souks, and the unexpected stillness of the Jardin Majorel. Do you know that Marrakech grew where mountain runoff met trade roads, becoming a crossroads that stitches Morocco's wild mountains, deep deserts, and restless sea into one unforgettable country? Only a handful of places on Earth hold sand seas that sing. Morocco's Sahara dunes emit haunting harmonic tones when the wind shifts. Do you know the Sahara Desert in Morocco hosts singing dunes in Erkchebi near Merzouga that can boom like a giant drum? Stretching beyond the horizon, the dunes of Erkchebi rise in waves as high as 150 meters and reshape themselves with every storm. Nomad caravans still cross these rippled seas, guiding camels along ancient routes that once linked sub-Saharan kingdoms to Atlantic ports. At Merzouga, visitors trade the city noise for a silence so vast it sharpens the stars above into learning maps. Night brings a galaxy spilled low across the Skifeh, and Bedouin storytellers trace constellations by memory, while tea steam curls in the dark. Beyond Erg Chebi, the quieter Erg Chagaga offers wilder solitude where sand meets hidden salt plains and fossilized riverbeds. Both ergs were shaped by the Atlas Mountains, whose rain shadow carved the Sahara and channeled life into linear oases. The Draya Valley, a green ribbon of date palms and kasbahs, springs from that narrow mercy of water and links the desert to the high Atlas. Travelers once moved along this corridor to trade silver, salt, and stories, leaving fortified villages like Ait Ben Haddou as stone echoes of those crossings. In the Sahara, you feel time folding, days marked by sun, nights by stars, and human rhythms tuned to water and wind. To cross it is to understand why Morocco's cultural map is stitched from Berber, Arab, and Saharan threads, braided over millennia. Listen closely, and the dunes will still speak. A reminder that the desert is not empty, but full of stories waiting to be followed. Follow those stories, and they will lead you onward, from the last dune to the high peaks where Morocco's lifelines are born. Ras El Ma, the crystalline spring that feeds Chefchaouen's blue alleys, is one of Morocco's rare year-round mountain springs that gush through karst limestone. Do you know Ras El Ma's waters were believed by locals to influence the town's famous indigo pigments and even sustain an endemic trout found only in this stretch of the Rif? The spring emerges in terraces of ferns and moss, spilling into shallow pools where villagers wash wool and children paddle with bare feet. From these pools, clear channels cut through cobbles and wooden sluices, carrying water down into the heart of the Medina and beyond into terraced fields. At dawn, you can hear the water's steady voice threading the alleys, a constant that once guided mule caravans and now draws painters and photographers. Stone mills and old water wheels, some still turning, nod to centuries when Ras El Ma powered local industries and kept dye vats luminous. Walk a little uphill, and the stream widens into a ribbon of emerald, where aromatic herbs and wildflowers cluster in the cool microclimate. Small waterfalls here form fragile pools that host insects and amphibians, rare in the surrounding dry hills, creating an unexpected biodiversity pocket. Stories say The spring marks a boundary between the cultivated town and the wilder Rif, a place where shepherd paths meet tourist routes. Hikers follow the water's sound to reach panoramic ridges, making Ras El Ma the quiet threshold from Chefchaouen's blues to the mountain's raw greens. Local women still carry jugs from the spring, and their daily rhythms keep techniques of indigo dyeing and wool washing alive in plain sight. Those domestic rituals turn the water into a cultural thread, connecting family life to the geology and climate that created Ras El Ma. In rainy seasons, the spring swells and redraws the landscape, carving new rivulets and revealing rock faces smoothed over millennia. In dry summers, it contracts, but never vanishes, a stubborn source that defines why Chefchaouen remained habitable where other villages withered. Photographers trek from the Medina at dawn to capture reflections and the small human dramas by the water's edge, preserving ephemeral moments. And when you trace the stream downstream, you realize the same water that colors the walls also irrigates orchards and sustains forgotten stone terraces. That continuity makes Ras El Ma a quiet teacher. If you learn to read its channels, you can read the town's past and foresee its future. Stay with the spring for an hour, and you'll leave with a different map of Chefchaouen, one drawn in water, craft, and the patient labor of generations. From the snow-capped ridges of the High Atlas, where cedar forests cradle troops of Barbary macaques, to the sweeping Atlantic coast, where ancient sailors once mapped unknown shoals, Morocco stretches across worlds within a single border. It is a country where the living mosaics of volubilis sit above olive groves, and within a day's travel, you can trade the mosaic stones for saffron-scented souks in the kasbah-lined valleys below. Follow the riverbeds from the Dade's Gorge and the ochre kasbahs of Ait Ben Haddou, and you arrive at Erg Chebi's towering dunes, whose iron-rich sands glow like molten copper at sunset. Those same dunes hide subterranean oases, fed by ancient aquifers, pockets of green and life that made the Sahara passable for caravans centuries ago. Turn north, and the blue-washed alleys of Chefchaouen open into Mediterranean terraces where local dyes and traditions tell a story that threads seamlessly into the Andalusian echoes of Fes and Tangier. Along the coast, Essaouira's winds sculpt both the city and the surf, connecting centuries of maritime trade to the music-filled squares where Nawa rhythms still hum. In every place, from the watery crash of Ouzoud Falls to the quiet stones of Volubilis, geology and culture have co-written a script of adaptation and exchange. when you stand at the edge of any of these landscapes, whether in a mountain pass or on a dune ridge, you sense that Morocco's true treasure is the way one hidden wonder leads you to another.